Welcome to episode 2 of Origins Unknown podcast. My name is Claire Huntington.
And I'm Chris Holt. Welcome to the first episode featuring my personal search for Origins Unknown. From crying over boba tea in a movie theater to accidentally applying to a trip to Korea, I will walk you through my story.
In this episode, we will discuss hidden triggers for adoptees.
We will also introduce you to more of the specifics regarding cultural and political hurdles that are specific to adoptees from South Korea.
Thank you so much for joining us for not only this episode, but on our search for Origins Unknown.
Enjoy.
I think I walked the long way home. Now fall, just pick me up and hold me close when things get rough. And you never walk the road alone, 'cause we've all got our origins unknown.
Welcome to episode 2 to Origins Unknown podcast. I am Chris Holt.
I'm Claire Huntington.
And this is officially our second episode. So today we are going to dive a little deeper in Korean adoption and everything kind of circulating why Korea gave up I think it's like 130,000 babies between the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So...
And we thought it was important just to not confuse people. We will be covering Canadian adoption in the 80s in our next episode, but we just figured that if we didn't do them as separate episodes, it would get too confusing.
Yeah.
It's confusing for us as well.
Yeah, and it's kind of heavy, especially with Korean adoption. So I guess just to kind of preface all this, I only found out about a lot of the circumstances surrounding Korean adoption and the boom of that with like last year. So I went to a conference at Berkeley in February, right before the pandemic hit. And it was just talking about Korean adoption. So I guess to start, it really stems from the Korean War. And I think you need to have to remember and understand that Korea during the 60s, 70s, and 80s was equivalent to the United States in like the 20s during the Great Depression. So people were, working factory jobs, making $5 a month. I mean, it was just extreme poverty. So during the Korean War, the United States, obviously, they had military bases all littered all over South Korea. And so only natural that soldiers were sleeping with Korean women. And prostitution was a kind of like a profession per se. So
a commodity industry that stemmed from the war.
Yes.
Okay.
So because of that, obviously they had mixed race babies. So what happened was North Korea got wind of this, and North Korea does what they do best, and they like to pump out propaganda. So they basically started pumping out flyers and like things on their news channels saying, look at South Korea. The United States is occupying South Korea. Now they're being colonized by the white people. So I think out of like it feels kind of like a peer pressure type of thing. I don't know. But South Korea didn't want that, or they didn't like the light that was being put on them. So basically, Korean adoption started as a way to get rid of mixed race babies. So they wanted a pure bloodline. So yeah, just hearing that was just kind of shocking for me, because I thought that adoption, we all think of it as like a way for people to take in babies from, parents that can't afford them or take care of them. So
the chosen ones, not the discarded ones.
So the fact that Korea was trying to get rid of mixed race babies just is shocking to me. So that's how it started. And then there was a man named Harry Holt who started a adoption agency called Holt International. No relation to me.
Okay, I was about to ask. That's quite the coincidence.
Yeah, when I found that out, even when I went to this conference, I was like, they saw my name tag and they said, like, Holt, like Holt International? I'm like, no, not at all. That's just a coincidence. So Harry Holt was an American, and he basically brought back a large group of Korean siblings and kids and then adopted all of them. And then basically from like the 70s on, it was just America viewing South Korea as a third world country. So then they thought, hey, let's just more altruistic. Let's just take in these babies that need homes. And that's why like adoption became super popular. But then we'll get into this a little later, but like then it led into money-making schemes and,
When people saw that people were willing to pay, like a supply and demand, essentially babies became a commodity.
Absolutely. And
it's insane to me.
I don't think that that's just unique to Korea. I think that that's other countries as well. But what makes Korea slightly unique is the culture. So because of prostitution in the 60s and because of the war, Korea has a very confusing and just odd culture when it comes to children. So the way it's supposed to work in Korea is that you get married and you have a kid. Awesome. You do that, the child is afforded an ID number, they get healthcare, they get an education. But if you are born outside of wedlock, then that baby is literally, you don't get an ID number. You're just kind of cast off to the side. So you really don't have an identity.
Wow.
Just because they hold marriage so sacred. So
what would not having an ID number, do you know what that would restrict you from doing?
You can't even go to school. It's kind of, I want to say it's equivalent to having like a social security card number or a passport or some type of form of ID. Like you wouldn't even be afforded identification.
So you can go to school without a passport though.
No, yeah. But within the school systems in Korea, I think it's slightly different. You need an ID number just to like be part of society. So it was their way of
discouraging
people having children outside of marriage. But set that aside, the culture also, when a baby is born, they are property of the father.
What?
Yeah, so it's a patriarchal hierarchy. So let's just say the mother and father get divorced, the child automatically goes to the father's family. So the woman, the mother, has no rights over the child, which is
goodness.
Yeah,
would cause problems if she ever wanted to. That's probably so that women can't leave.
Yeah, it really is obviously a male-dominated society. But the whole ID rule or that stipulation that they created back then changed. I think it was like 2006, so it's pretty recent that they changed those laws. But ultimately, if you were married or unmarried and you were pregnant, not only would society kind of shun you and cast you off to the side, but your community also would not support you. So you would have zero support. So that's why a lot of women gave up babies, just because of their circumstances. They didn't even either have enough money, or they had a baby outside of marriage, or in Korea, if you get remarried, typically the new husband will not accept children from other marriages.
Oh.
So that's another reason why women give up children for adoption. It's really kind of crazy. So to be given up for adoption in Korea, to get orphan status, you would have to come from a single unwed mother. So a lot of women, based on their situation, whether they were single or, even horrible situations like rape, they would go to adoption agencies and especially women that were married that couldn't afford more children, which was, from my understanding, my situation. Married couples would actually go to adoption agencies and ask the adoption agency to forge and just fabricate forms so they could officially give the baby up for adoption. So
without any repercussions.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So.
And so if your child can't go to school, that's another reason to force mothers to put your kid up for adoption. Like your kid can't go to school, your kid can't probably get all of other things. It's kind of forcing their hand.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's
I can't imagine.
Yeah, the conference I went to was really crazy because they actually flew in 3 birth mothers from Korea, didn't speak English, so we had a translator there. And they came from 3 different situations that were most common amongst all us Korean adoptees. So just picture a big auditorium, these 3 Korean women, and then a crowd of like 150 people or whatever. And all of us are Korean adoptees. So all of us are looking at these 3 women as, okay, they are in many ways a proxy for what might be my situation.
Oh, wow.
So the first mother tells her story, and she was married. She had a daughter. They were very poor, so they moved in with their in-laws or her in-laws. And then they had a second baby. So they were living in a small apartment. So it was the mother, the father, the sister, the daughter, and then her and her husband, and then her 2 kids. So basically there was technically six people in a small apartment. So this woman's mother-in-law forced her to give up her second baby for adoption because she says there's no room in this place, which is terrible. So she was forced to give her up. The second woman, she was dating a boy. They got pregnant. She wasn't married. So then she was automatically assumed that either amongst her friends that maybe she was a prostitute, or her family and his family didn't support the baby because they weren't married. So
could you retroactively get married, or is it any child conceived?
No,
there's just no misnomer. You can't have a shotgun wedding.
Yeah. I don't even think that that's a thing there. So she gave up her baby for adoption. And then the third woman, which is the saddest story of all, she was able to find a job in Seoul, kind of in a factory. And she was able to afford an apartment. She was kind of living on her own, feeling pretty independent. And then she unfortunately got raped, and then was trying to hide the pregnancy for a while at work in the factory. And then sooner or later, her belly would show. Mm-hmm. And then she got fired because her employers thought she was a prostitute.
So is it just like if you're unmarried and pregnant, you're just automatically assumed a prostitute? Like
assumed. Yep. Yeah. So then she basically couldn't afford her apartment because she got fired. Oh, so she lived on the couch of a fellow worker that worked in the factory with her. And then eventually when the baby was born, I mean, she had no money for food. The baby was always crying. And then this person who was letting her sleep on her couch said, look, you need to get out of here. I have to work like 15-hour shifts. Your baby never stops crying. I can't get any sleep. You need to leave. So then she was basically on the street. So she had to give up her baby for adoption because she just didn't have the means to take care of the baby. So it was really hard to listen to them talk about this, because you have to also remember, in their culture, this is so much shame that they live with. It's tremendous shame on them, their families. It's like that scarlet letter for them.
Hester Prynne.
Yeah. So eventually they turned to the audience, and it was kind of moving. They said, why on earth would you want to seek us out, as in like birth mothers, when we gave you up? Like, we would think that you would be very upset with us. So like, we're moved that you're all here, but at the same time, we live in so much shame. We can't even face our children, but let alone all of you, because we see all of you as kind of our children, because we all kind of could. Yeah. So that was hard. And then we did a healing circle, and they had us each go up to each birth mother, give them a hug. And I thought this weekend was going to be like, oh, I'm going to learn about Korean adoption. Woohoo. I was like ugly crying, like audible crying. It was terrible. And I just remember just like hyperventilating, crying. Like it was terrible. So I remember I hugged the first mother, and they don't speak English, but she just whispered in my ear, and she's crying, I'm crying. And she just says, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And it's like,
heart. Yeah. Ow.
Like it was heavy. And I made me realize that I think as a Korean adoptee, I've repressed a lot of stuff. And the fact that I was having like a visceral response that I couldn't control, I felt like, damn,
it's in there. It's ingrained in you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but what's crazy is that Korea, even from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and now to today, they have quickly turned their country into a very developed nation way faster than the US has. So even though things are changing, Korea is still very much set in their ways. And one really cool thing at the end of the conference, there was a representative from the government of South Korea. He had made a video, and they played it for us. And basically he said, I think he might have been the president. I don't remember. Someone high up in their government basically sent out a video, and it said, we live in tremendous shame, giving up over 100,000 of you. And we want to make it right, and we don't know exactly how to do that, but we welcome you back to South Korea. We want to sponsor trips, which they have a ton of trips that adult adoptees, Korean adoptees can go back, and it's fully funded. But he said that we've erected a park in South Korea that is just dedicated to Korean adoptees. So we'd like you to come back, discover your motherland, and we shouldn't have given you up so quickly. And it's just weird, like even saying it, it's like those mothers felt like my birth mother. That guy felt like my birth. It was just a weird thing. And
you just attributed, like you were immediately able to imprint on these people.
Yeah, super weird. And then I'm sitting there, and I remember I was with 2 Korean adoptees that are part of my CAD group here in Utah that flew out. We all went to this conference.
And sorry, just your CAD group, just to reiterate for people who might be joining us right
Sorry,
now.
CAD group is just a Korean adoptees. That's what we call ourselves, CADs. So there are because there are so many Korean adoptees in the US, there are a lot of CAD groups all over the country. So every state has a CAD group that you can find.
Sorry for that segue. But just
absolutely. And so I remember after the talk, I'm sitting there and everyone's getting coffee and I'm just staring off in the distance. And
after ugly crying.
Yeah. And one of my friends.
You must have been popular in that group.
It was.
You were the weird kid?
No, I think from everyone I spoke to, most people had been to either a sponsored trip to Korea. A lot of them had done birth parent searches, either met their birth parents or got information about it. But I was very new to all of this. So I'm just kind of out of it.
You were a noob and you had no idea what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah. I honestly thought it was going to be a fun weekend. I learned something.
Like summer camp, and then it wasn't. No,
it was the polar opposite. And I remember one of my friends, his name is Chris as well. He just comes up to me. He's like, "You okay?" And I just said, "Dude, this is so heavy." And then he laughed and he says, Yeah. He's like, "Don't worry. Like we all have been there and it's normal. So don't overanalyze it. But it's good that you're learning this because I think I still have met a lot of Korean adoptees that are not interested in or don't even know that CAD groups exist."
We, through this podcast, have had someone reach out to us who doesn't know a lot about Korean adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has been really great that we also want to shed light for perhaps some younger people who don't know about this history.
Yeah.
And about what you might encounter that might be a lot more difficult than other North American adoption stories.
Yeah, and I have met a couple Korean adoptees that actually, when I mentioned the idea of a CAD group, a lot of them kind of are put off by it, or they just think, I'm not interested in that. And that was me. I just thought that connecting with other people that are Korean adoptees, I just felt like was weird, and I didn't need to share that with anyone. But I recommend it. You know, I've become close with my group here, and they've helped me kind of even understand more things about my own behavior based on being a Korean adoptee. So the depression, the mental health issues that I suffer from, down to all sorts of little things, we all connect on and we all react the same way because we're a product of that system. And they call Korea, the land of orphans. And so later down the road, it became a money-making scheme. So then, people were, and to this day, there's a database of families in Korea that are looking for their babies that have been sold into the system, which is crazy. But, I think part of me is just wanting to go back to Korea. And I think like anyone, we all want to know our roots, regardless of whether you're adopted or not, I think that's why Ancestry and
23andMe.
Yeah, 23andMe. All those things are popular because people want to know, all right, what am I made of? Like, what is my percentage of this or that? Or, it's the curiosity that we all have as human beings. But as adoptees, I think it's way deeper and it's way more complicated. Yeah. And sometimes ignorance is bliss. It's better to. For me, I like the idea of knowing that my birth mother was 17 and that was it. That's all I knew. I was like, okay, that's fine.
Like that happy story of she had no other option. Yeah.
And I think that my birth parents search started with me seeing a documentary called Twinsters, which was made by a girl named Samantha Futerman. And she is Korean adoptee. If you haven't seen that movie, it's on Netflix. It's on Hulu. I think you can find it.
You can also, so if you are listening from Canada, perhaps we'll make some links just as we're from different countries. But I know that I found it on Amazon, I believe.
Yeah,
So
it's all over the place now.
Yeah, we'll make sure to link it. And I actually am obsessed with that documentary as well. I forced my dad to watch it when we were in France.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was completely fangirling that you even knew her.
Yeah. Which is funny because it's the same thing. I remember I was by myself for a weekend and I wanted to go see a movie, and I looked up some movies at a local theater in Miami where I was living at the time. And there was a movie called Twinsters. I didn't know anything about it. I looked up the synopsis and it said, oh, 2 identical twin Korean sisters separated at birth and find each other 20 years later on the internet. I'm like, a multiple. I'm Korean. I'm adopted. This is perfect. So I went down to this theater. I got a thing of boba tea just to make myself feel more Korean. So there I am in this theater with my boba tea. And I'm like, just like the conference, I'm like, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be so awesome. 5 minutes in, ugly crying to a point where someone actually like said in the theater, are you okay? Like, I'm sorry, but you're making a lot of noise. And I'm just like, I'm so sorry. I just had to leave for a second. And it was embarrassing, but it made me realize that,
You poor thing.
yeah, there are a lot of things that I repressed that I didn't think I needed to know. And that documentary really pushed that for me and there were a lot of similarities in that documentary. So
Yeah, I've seen it. And so I can.
yeah, Samantha is an American girl that's adopted by a family in New Jersey that has 2 kids of their own when they adopted her, which my brothers and I were adopted by a family in New Jersey. We all flew into JFK just like Samantha did. And my parents have 2 kids prior to us. So I thought that was kind of weird. And then the other girl was adopted by a French family in Paris, and her adoption agency was Holt International. So that was the first time I'd ever heard of that adoption agency. So I'm sitting here thinking, that American girl that's pretty weird because that's pretty close, almost identical to our story. And then the fact the other girl was adopted by, or her adoption agency was Holt International. I honestly, for a second, I'm like, who's punking me? Like, where's Ashton? Is he going to jump out? Like, this is just too weird.
The
and
similarities and coincidences.
Yeah. And so then after the movie, I remember I was crying most of the movie. I sat on a bench.
Into your bubba tea.
Yeah. I think I was crying into it and drinking my own tears. Like, it was just a bad situation.
Oh my goodness.
So I sat on a bench for like an hour after the movie, and I just said to myself, I need to do a search. And so I called my older sister. And then again, this is a tangent, but that's what sparked my birth parent search. And I think for a lot of us, and I don't know about you, but sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need that little push because
that kick or that awakening.
Yeah. And I would just say the advice that Samantha gave me, because I reached out to her, she found out about our story, and she said, look, I will help you any way I can. But she even said, look, just know that you need to be okay with whatever you find. You're opening a door.
Wow.
And if it's good or bad, especially if it's going to be bad, because let's be honest, it's most likely going to be bad. You need to be okay with it. And at the time, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm good. Mm-hmm. And then the more I found out, the more ugly tears and crying and
it's not easy.
Yeah. So I think, if this podcast is something like that for some people out there,
mm-hmm.
that would bring me joy, because I think sometimes, for me especially, I think in retrospect, I was just too scared to know or find out. I'd rather, keep that story in my head of her just being too young to keep us. So at the end of the day, people ask me sometimes when I tell them the story, they say, like, do you regret doing the search? And to be honest, no. And I feel like I should have done it sooner, because I think, set adoption aside, I think we all think we have enough time. I'm going to do it on Monday. Yeah. I'm going to start this next month. I'm going to New Year's resolutions, like all this stuff. But you could get hit by a truck tomorrow and it doesn't really matter. So honestly, if you have even an inkling, just a small desire, you really should start, because I don't know about you, but for most adoptees that I've talked to, it's a long road.
It is. And I would also say that that's great advice for any adoptee. Be okay with what you find. We all have this grandiose view in our head that it's going to be something perfect and almost this that we're infallible or
you think of these classic movie scenes where it's like, oh, everything's rainbows and
like
awesome.
you run across the field and your birth family and you're like, na, na, na. No, that's not going to be what's going to happen. I hate to say it. Most adoptees are a dirty secret.
Yeah.
You are. And I would say, so Origins Canada website dictates the reunion process as the reunion roller coaster. And that's a really great way of looking at it. There's different stages, and we'll go through that likely tomorrow. But it's just a roller coaster, and you're strapped in. And once you're strapped in on this roller coaster, when you hit a certain point, there's no going back.
Yeah. Yeah, because once you get that momentum,
you can't.
It's literally a machine that just keeps going. And there are moments where sometimes you're like, I want to get off the ride.
Completely. And that's when someone described it in the resources we've been looking at, that there comes a certain point in a roller coaster, human nature, you're like, no, I don't want to, but you are in this. You can't close that door once you've opened it.
Yeah, once you open it, it's open.
And what did I say to you? I want to just look through the mail slot.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what I think a lot of us want to do. But despite starting my search at 32, which was 6 years ago, I still don't have any finalized answers or conclusions or anything like that. And it would require me to go back to Korea, which I was accepted into a sponsored trip. And truth be known, I completely forgot that I applied for it. So I got
Did you just do it late night?
Late night. I don't know what was happening, but I got an email. I don't even know when I did it, but I got an email. It just says, congratulations. I was about to delete it.
Because you thought it was spam.
Yeah, but it had, I think it was called Bridge Tour. So it just said Bridge Tour, congratulations. I'm like, what? It says, congratulations, you've been accepted into this Bridge Tour. I think that's the name of it. We have, I think it's only 12 spots. And you had, apparently I looked up the app, you had to write an essay. I don't remember what I wrote. I don't remember writing an essay, but I got accepted into this program. So I was super excited. And then I thought, oh man, I can't go without my brothers. So I sent them an email. I said, hey, is there any spots for my brothers to maybe apply? And then they wrote me back. They're like, we're so sorry, but we only have a limited budget. And the deadline for the essays was like 3 months ago. And I'm like, oh.
So at least we know when you wrote the essay.
Yes. So then obviously because of COVID, the whole thing was canceled anyway. So
that is a great tip too, though. I mentioned that I did a late night search and thought I accidentally found something. Do not do late night adoption searches. Do not break up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or get into a fight with a friend and decide to go in and
don't do this drunk. Don't do this under the influence of anything, because honestly,
it's, oh my gosh,
it's jarring. It's super jarring. And I was conflicted. I was like, should I be excited? Like,
yeah,
I'm scared now. Like, that's a big step to go to Korea by myself without my brothers.
Shower, have a coffee, do it in the morning.
Yeah.
I've had a few situations and times where I thought I found something and had panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in birth searches and looking for things, never go looking. So finding your birth family is going to rock the foundation and rock you as a human being. If you are already going through a mental health issue, if you have lost your job, if you are in a low time, if you are struggling with depression and you do not feel like you have a support system, it is my personal recommendation, don't go looking for something.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. It's really great to have someone as a support system. I would actually recommend, if you can get therapy as you're going through this, to get therapy before. There are adoption therapists, which are really great.
Yeah. And I think also because there is so much trauma linked to adoption, and that was part of the conference, was talking about depression, suicide rates, divorce rates. These are all, I don't know what the statistics are for everyone else, but Korean adoptees, high suicide rates, high divorce rates, and that's just high mental health issues, depression, all these different things. So because those things are, I feel like when you're born, everything, like you are just this perfect being, and then whatever you start getting cracks here and chips there, and then before you know it, this whole idea, and this is another topic of physical touch within the first, hours or whatever that is, who knows, but there's a lot of trauma for any human being that isn't that is, taken from their birth mother and then kind of shipped off. So going back to what Claire was saying, if you are not in a good headspace,
don't go looking.
Like, we're already broken as it is. It's like, if you're not in a good headspace and then you go looking, I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and Michelle Visage she's on RuPaul's podcast. So she's been his best friend forever. She's such an incredible human being. And I remember going on a run and listening to their podcast about other stuff. And she talks about trauma in the womb, that there's been research done. There's a psychosomatic connection that when there's trauma from just like when you're being conceived or being carried, that there's almost that connection. And like you said, the first moments of being held. I personally, I don't know if this is towards adoption. We'll find out my story. When I cry or I'm upset, I don't want anyone to touch me. And I've been like that since I was a kid, because I hate to say it, no matter who your foster parent is, or if you were in an orphanage, when you are taking care of multiple children.
That's a good question.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you're taking care of multiple children, and that's something I want to find out. Multiple children, you're just trying to meet the needs of all of these kids.
Yeah.
Right? And so if one kid is crying, so if you have a one-on-one parent, or if it's your child, if your child's crying, you're going to pick it up and you're going to do all of that stuff. When you're a ward of the state and the kid's fine, like, you changed it, you fed it, like.
That's interesting. I don't even know I've thought about that. Like, anytime I've had an emotional moment, I don't want to be physically touched or around people.
It makes me angry when they try to. Like, I get.
Yeah, and I guess
that's really good.
I didn't even think about that, because I guess with other people that I've known over the years and even past relationships, it's always like, I'm sad, just hold me.
And you're just like, why?
And for me, I always feel I can picture myself like holding someone and thinking like.
So, and that's another thing too. Okay, so when you were, I'm not going to call you out, but you were getting a little bit emotional when you were talking about getting emotional.
Oh yeah.
And so I feel like any other human instinct would have been to be like,
yes.
But I looked at you and I'm like, oh good, I don't have to pretend.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to be like.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever do the awkward back pat?
Oh,
and
totally.
like the butt out hug? Like, this is great. I love this. Let's do this for a long time, or even.
But those are like even deeper conversations. Like, how do you deal with death? How do you deal with, things like that? I mean, I feel like anytime I'm having something extremely emotional, I kind of almost shut off. Like I feel apathetic. I feel
protected almost.
Yeah. I feel removed, like I can see the feeling and the emotion, but I'm not connected to it, like I need to separate myself from that. And it's just something I think I've always done. And I don't know if that was just me or the fact that
you're adopted. It's like, we're going to be going through and trying to figure out, separate what's adoption and what's just us.
Well, even dealing with depression and PTSD and all these things that I suffer from, I think hearing other adoptees, Korean adoptees, talk about their mental health issues, it really did make me feel, which is part of this whole point of this podcast, is to create a community, is to create a safe place for people to feel like, oh, that person sees me and I see them and I get it, because when I first met my CAD group, the first thing I thought was, all these people look super Korean. Like, they don't know me. They don't know what's up. And then we were all in a Korean restaurant and we were all asking like, hey, have you ever had this? And like, we didn't know much about Korean cuisine. So it was just this weird, funny dinner where it's like, I've never had that. Like, I don't know. Like,
Does anyone want to go to like Applebee's instead?
Yeah, totally. And so then we started sharing photos of our families. And then I realized everyone had white families. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they totally get it. I mean, okay.
And you guys all just picked the Korean restaurant because you thought the other Korean adoptees would want to go to the Korean restaurant?
No. Carrie, who's part of the group, I think she recommended it. And I mean, she's definitely had more Korean food than I have. So we just thought it would be nice for us to eat Korean food and just connect over
that's like
a
so
Korean
wholesome.
meal. Yeah, totally. It's awesome.
It's just so wholesome.
And it's been really great. And I feel like it goes back to that idea that I wish I had found a group like that earlier on. But again, hindsight's 20/20. So, but yeah, just to kind of go back to what we were talking about with the CAD groups, I think that they're super unique. And the idea also was to try to create a similar group that CADs have for you and everyone else out there.
And just in hearing about your CAD groups, I messaged back to you. I'm like, oh, wow, I wish I had that. And I think that we've realized in all of the adoptees that we've talked to that we all feel this way. And we all have similar sentiments, and that it'd be just great. We would really love to in the future host live shows.
Yeah, Zoom calls or live shows, that'd be really awesome. Even my younger sister is Chinese, and we adopted her when we were living in Singapore. And again, she doesn't have a community, even though there are lots of Chinese adoptees out there, but it's just not the same for whatever reason. And maybe it's just because of the vast number of Korean adoptees within those 3 decades. But I think one thing that I did take away from the conference was that they did bring up Native Americans and adoptions within their community, and how there are so many parallel lines between Native Americans and adoption and Korean adoption, which really at the end of the day, I think can cover most adoptions. I think that a lot of the issues and the topics that we always talk about, are universal amongst most of us.
I would have to say one of the differences is it wasn't necessarily a shame culture for, at least in Canada. There's something called the 60s sweep. We really want to cover like First Nations Aboriginal adoption in Canada because it's heartbreaking. It wasn't necessarily like cultural pressure. It was literal removal, forceful remoul of people from homes, which is so heartbreaking because then they're in the same country. So then there's kids trying to run away. Yeah. And but just adoption as a whole, we have this common trauma that brings us all together. And so I've felt connected to a lot of adoptees, but to say that you and I became fast friends is an understatement. Yeah. And we want that for all of you. Yeah. And I think one big thing that we've heard from a lot of people is this common feeling like I don't belong, or people don't get me, or I've always had this weird vibe or thought or feeling that I couldn't really articulate as a young kid. And, and again, there are a lot of people that are adopted into great families and everything's happy, but there's still something missing. And it's no one's fault. It's just a product of a situation. So, yeah. And I had an instance where people like to explain to me why I should be grateful. So I finally had enough, and I've been very passive and conformist my entire life. So it's not until probably about this year that I've had the wherewithal to have any sort of confrontation. So this particular individual, I didn't know them really well, but they said, well, why do you care? Like, you should be grateful, yada, yada, yada. So I turned it around on them in a positive way, but I said, okay, so like, where's your family from? And they said, well, my grandfather's from this country, my grandmother's from that country. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. That must really shape how you feel about yourself. And they said, yeah, I'm American, but I identify as XYZ. And then I said, do you look like anybody in your family? And they said, yeah, I have my grandmother's eyes, and I'm tall like my mother's grandfather, and I look similar to my sister. And I was like, that's so cool. And then so I just was asking them other leading questions. I'm like, what time were you born? And they're like, at 3:30. I'm like, where were you born? They're like, all this stuff, and like having them feel this nostalgic feeling and deep-rooted good feelings. And I said, now I want you to wipe all that away. Who are you? And I said, also, you can't know because the government says you can't find out until you're 18. And that for them, they were just like, whoa. Yeah, I think there are so many things people take for granted. That's why I love meeting people's parents, because I love seeing mannerisms, idiosyncrasies, looks, facial features, expressions, stuff like that, which is super fascinating to me. But then that leads into, what we were talking about before, like the whole nature versus nurture, like how much of me is a product of just me, or how much is it a product of being raised by my parents? So, but ultimately, I mean, my birth parent search, after seeing that movie, and it totally like rocked my world. I remember I went to dinner by myself after the movie. I was on the phone with my older sister. You're so emo. And she was crying because I was crying. And she says, how could you see that movie by yourself? I'm like, Jen, I thought it was going to be like fun and like I was going to learn something, but it was
just really like a kick in the nuts. And she says, "Oh my God, are you okay? Can I meet you?" Like, I said, "No, I'm fine."
That's such an adoptee thing.
I was eating at Earl's, which is a Canadian restaurant in Miami. And some clients from a gym that I used to own in Miami, they came walking by.
Oh no, of course.
And of course, there I am crying over my plate. And the woman...
Eating carbs.
Yeah, I was eating French fries. I'll never forget it. And she just looks at me and she says, are you crying? Are you okay? And I just said, "Oh, allergies, and there's no allergies in Miami." I'm like, "Oh, I am just allergies."
To emotions about adoption. I'm allergic to emotion.
Yeah, pretty much. And then my older sister is a partner at an immigration firm in Miami. So then I called her and I said, "Hey, I want to do a birth parent search, but anything I find, can I just send to you because I need it just double checked by you to see if things are legit?" So then I called my mom and I asked her, I didn't even segue into it. I just, "Hey mom, what's the name of the adoption agency that you adopted us from?"
Oh, I do that all the time. There's no intro and there's no
But I don't know what to tell her. So I just said, there was a long pause and I could just picture my mom's face and how she was reacting to it. And then she just says, why do you want to know? And I said, "Well, I just saw this movie called Twinsters. So if you want to know what I'm going through right now, you can watch it. This has nothing to do with you. I just need some closure." And she says, "Okay." It was called Love the Children. So I said, "Okay, cool." Google search, Love the Children, doesn't exist anymore.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay, that sucks. But it had a bunch of links for different organizations in Korea that I could email. So I sent out a very generic email. And mind you, at this time, the adoption papers that I had from my parents, it only said that our birth mother was 17 and no other real information on our birth parents. And there was a photo attached to the file that my brothers and I all have. So my mom made a copy of it. It's framed.
Oh.
All three of us have it. It's on the fridge.
And it's of you three, correct?
Yeah. So it's us three being held by three women. For, at the time, 32 years of my life, I had no idea who they were. My mom didn't know who they were. It's just these three women. My mom just says, "They told us this was taken before you left for the States." So I said, "Okay, cool." So I sent out a generic email. I said, "Hi, my name is Chris Holt. I'm an identical triplet born December 20th, 1982. I'm just looking for more information on our birth parents." That's all I said. Didn't say anything about the adoption agency. I just said birth year, identical triplets, and that was it. So I got a lot of emails back saying, "Oh, you need to pay us $100 and we'll get some information." And I'm like, "I'm not paying any money."
So it's after the fact, it was a money-making scam to sell kids and then now to find your information because they didn't know if they were the real. They want a processing fee and they might not have any information.
Oh, for sure. You don't know. I mean, there's so many scams on the internet anyway. So I sent those to my sister and she's like, don't, this is bogus. Don't.
Okay. So people looking Korean adoptees don't pay money.
You should not pay any money for anything.
No.
For information. Okay. Yeah. So I get an email a week later and there is a guy named Park Kyung-young from Korean Adoption Services, KAS. And he writes in the email, "Hello, Christopher. I have your Love the Children documents on my desk."
So you didn't reference Love the documents?
I didn't reference that. So then I said,
Wow.
"What?" So then he says, "Based on the Adoption Act of 2012, which I don't even know what that is, you need to fill out an application to request a birth parent search. And since there's three of you, we need 3 of these applications signed." So I sent it to my older sister. I'm kind of freaking out because I didn't mention Love the Children to this person. And my older sister looks up this adoption agency or the KAS. And then she calls me and she says, "I don't know how you found this person, but this all checks out." So then she's nervous. I'm freaking out. I'm shaking. So then I told her, I said, what do I do? She's like, "Email back, fill out the application."
So just because one of the unique instances of your adoption is that there's 3 of you.
Yes.
So when you're searching, for me, I am a governing body of one.
Yep.
I'm a one-man army. There's 3 of you. So at any point in time, did you call your brothers?
Oh, I told them. They had no interest in doing a search. So they were like, "Yeah, do whatever you want."
But
cool.
they weren't.
They weren't against it. They just have no desire to do it themselves.
So because you were a triplet though, had one of them been against it, nothing would have come of this?
Well, no. Here, so we have the applications. I filled it out. And literally, it's name, address, sign. Justin fills it out. I send it to Jeremy.
So you could
3 days later, I'm like, Jeremy, what are you doing right now? And he says, I'm busy. I said, Jeremy, it's a one piece of paper application. Just sign it for me. And then he just says, I'm really busy, bro. And at the time, Jeremy wasn't extremely busy. So, of course, I got frustrated and I said, look, out of everyone in this family, you're the least busy person in this family.
Oh,
so you know
fired.
what? I'm just going to sign it for you. So, yes.
Allegedly. You're going to allegedly sign it for him.
So I allegedly signed the documents, sent them in. So I get an email back and it says, all right, so we've gotten the applications, so we're starting the process. But in the meantime, we feel that it's important to tell you now. That's all he wrote. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Like it was open-ended? Like he almost...
Yeah.
Like he forgot to send the rest of the email?
So, well, it says, we thought it would be important to tell you now. If you're interested, email me back. So then I'm like, well...
Tell you what now?
Duh. Exactly. So I'm like, I want to know. I don't know what that is. So then he says to me, oh, well, I'm attaching the original, the correct adoption documents.
Wait, what?
That were forged because at the time, again, I thought our birth mother was single, but come to find out they were married. So then they told the adoption agency to fabricate forms so we would be eligible to be put into orphan status. Because remember, the mother has to be single and unwed. Mm-hmm. So he says, well, here are the papers. Your parents were married and you have a brother that was 5 years old when you were born. So then right off the bat, that first sentence, I'm freaking out because I'm thinking, oh, our birth mother's 17. She maybe got remarried and has other kids. So maybe I have half siblings or whatever.
Siblings.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So to find out that we were a happy family and we just didn't stay together because of money was heartbreaking. So then he says also, and then I found out our birth mother's 26, father was 32, which is weird because I was 32 at the time that I was looking for them.
Of course, it has to be that exact age.
Yeah, super weird. And then he says, oh, I've also attached a photo. I don't know if you have it, but it's of, it was taken the day before you all left for JFK Airport. If you want to know who these women are, I can let you know.
Why?
And I'm like...
Okay, well, I guess maybe he's being respectful because maybe other people don't know. But for me, the mystery and intrigue, like, did you get anything done or any sleep in between these emails?
No, not at all. Like, I was crying most of the time, and then I cry myself to sleep. I wake up, I'm crying again. It's like, it's that scene in The Holiday where she's just crying all the time. Like, that's how I felt. It was just constant crying and emotions.
I picture that Dane Cook's comedy sketch as well, where he's like, hello, and then you just cry in the mirror to make yourself cry harder.
Yeah. It was ugly. So I get an email back and he says, okay, well, the woman on the left, and again, unbeknownst to me at the moment, I didn't know we were separated. I thought we were all in the same foster home.
Oh, God.
He says, the woman on the left was your foster mother that took care of you and Justin. The woman in the middle is your caseworker who did medical checkups once a month for the first 17 months that you guys were here until you left. And then the woman on the right is Jeremy's foster mother. So then I had a billion questions. I'm like, wait, what do you mean? Two foster mothers? Why were we were in different homes? He says, yeah, we were separated. Couldn't find, one woman that could take care of 3 babies all at once. So we found 2 women in the same neighborhood. So I thought, okay, fine. And then he said, believe it or not, but your caseworker is my boss. And
wait, like his current boss?
His current boss. And she says she still works here at Korean Adoption Services. And when I told her that you reached out, she started crying because the sweaters you're all wearing, she knitted for all 3 of you before you left. So then I'm crying. I'm like, what? Oh my God. Like,
that lady's...
Basically, she's our mom. Like, she is our mom for the first 17 months of our life.
She was like taking care of you and knitted you matching sweaters for your special trip.
Yeah. So then I wanted to get her email, but they refused to give me her email address. So I couldn't even contact her. And then I said, okay, cool. Let's do the search. So then like 3 weeks later, he emails me back. He says, oh, we found some information on your birth mother, but unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but she passed away last June.
When were you searching?
I don't even, it's all in my emails. So it probably was like September. Like, it was recent. Like, apparently from what they were saying, like, she passed away like months prior to the search.
This sounds like a movie. Like, this sounds like something I would pay money to read. Yeah.
And so there I'm crying because then I called my brother Justin, and I remember he told me, he says, hey man, this is okay. We never knew her, so it's okay. And I said, but we don't have a choice now. That's what bothers me.
It's that option. And that's one of the things we talked about in our first episode.
Yeah.
That the longer that you wait, the less likely
absolutely.
relatives are going to be alive. And so we want to put that into people's minds. Like you said, you know, you always have time and whatnot. No, like if you are,
life is short.
Yeah. And if you're in a great place and you want to look and know, like.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then a week later, I got another email saying, we found information on your birth father. Unfortunately, he died in 1985. So then I said, 1985, he was 32. We were born in 82. So he was only 35 when he died. And then I sent them an email. I said, well, can you tell me how they passed away? Like, what were the circumstances? What did she die from? How did he die at 35? And then he writes, well, based on the Adoption Act of 2012, we can't give you that medical information without their consent. I said, all due respect, you just told me they're dead. So who am I going to get consent from? Can I get consent from a relative? And they said, well, we're not allowed to reach out to them based on the laws here. And then I said, okay, what about our brother? You told me I had a brother that was 5 years old when we were born. And then he says, we have no information on your brother. So it'd be literally trying to find a needle in a haystack. So literally that was the end of that search. And then fast forward back to this conference at Berkeley, I told everyone, and I'm talking like older adoptees in their 50s and 60s, told them the story, and they just said to me, that stuff is a lie. Don't listen to anything you hear. I don't want to get your hopes up, but it's most likely a lie. The only way you're going to know, unless you have an actual death certificate, and you need to go to Korea to get that. And I'm like, what? So, unfortunately, that's kind of where it's at. So,
and you're at a standstill now.
Oh, yeah, totally. Total standstill. So, part of me was crushed when I got those emails, but then going to the conference, I got a little angry because I felt like I had all those emotions that might not even be real. Like,
so you grieved for someone who might still be there.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's weird, and I don't know what to believe. So it's confusing. So going back to that idea of ignorance is bliss, I don't regret doing the search. I think it's given me some information, not enough, or it hasn't given me any type of closure, but Carrie, one of the girls in my CAD group, when she went to this conference with me, she met her birth mother for the first time at that conference. And she was told that her birth mother was dead. So, so she met her birth mother. I met her. I remember, and sorry, Carrie, you can attest to this, but when she saw me with all my tattoos, she was a little like, I mean, she's OG Korean, like just very traditional.
Well, I hate to say you might give some North American mothers a bit of pause too.
Yeah. People
very
cross
nice.
Streets.
He's very nice.
Yeah.
I'm probably the dangerous one.
I'm a teddy bear. I mean, look, like my guilty pleasure is pop music. I mean,
yeah, we joke that there's one girl in this podcast and it's not me.
So, but you know, I think it's just don't wait, because I mean, I was just talking to my mom today, and my grandfather just passed away, and she was just saying, thank you. She was just saying, look, one day you wake up and you think, holy crap. You know, my mom is, I'm not going to say her age on here because she's going to be super pissed. She likes to tell everyone that she's 24.
Yeah, your mom's 24.
Yeah. So she's like,
everybody's
oh my gosh.
Mom is always 24 for infinity. That's the rule.
But even for me, I felt like, and I don't know if this is just me, but I thought living to 21, I remember as a kid, I'm like, if I can just get to 21, like that would be like really crazy.
I'm like shocked that I made it to 30.
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to live past 21 for some reason.
I made stupid decisions. I once had to walk over the Canadian border at Niagara Falls with my suitcase. Dad, don't tell the story.
Yeah, I was so many stupid decisions in college, from being in a fraternity and just partying.
You were in a fraternity?
Oh, yeah. Sigma Phi Epsilon.
So American.
Oh, totally. Totally. Oh, don't get me wrong. I lived overseas my entire life. And when I moved to the States, I wanted to go on a yellow school bus because I love the magic yellow school bus, the children's books.
Miss Frizzle?
Yeah. Loved it. Got on one. They're death traps. There's no seatbelts. It's uncomfortable. The windows don't work. I mean, I'm used to the buses that we had in Norway were what you guys, or here in America, would consider like charter bus, had like air conditioning, bathrooms and stuff like that. So I just thought that's what all, and this is me being super spoiled, thought that all buses had that. So when I got on one, I just thought, wow, the fantasy was so much better than reality. Like, this sucks. I mean, this is a death. There's no seatbelts. I'm like, how is this possible? But I think
they don't have school buses in Canada. They're just like 4 seats or 5 seats.
Really?
No.
Oh. Wait, are you talking about like a short bus? Like what?
I'm sorry, I just said, we ride our moose.
Yeah.
We actually had blizzard drills where you would strap like the younger kids to the older kids and you'd walk home together.
What?
Yeah. Like I've never had a snow day. Like there's no such thing as a snow day.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
Well, no, but like it'd be like up to your waist. So it'd be the point where they're like, okay, older children, make sure the other children don't end up in a snowdrift. And you.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. But that's, it's, I just feel like, I woke up and now I'm 38, and it really does fly by. So
it completely does.
Yeah. And I just encourage everyone, if it's scary, just
email us.
Yeah, email us, but then just know that that's okay. It's okay to feel fear or anxiety from it because, a lot of this touches subconscious parts of us, all of us.
That you repressed to survive.
Yeah, we don't have access to consciously. So, yeah, until you are hit with a moment like I had at this conference with these Korean birth mothers, I didn't know it was there. Yeah, or the boba tea, yeah. But I didn't know it was there until it strikes a nerve and then you realize, oh, wow, that's real. So...
and that is crazy that you have a visceral reaction. I've had some instances and things I've read and done. I would say that it is, don't go to adoption movies by yourself or...
Yeah, don't think you're going to have a fun time. I honestly thought it was going to be the best time. And I had someone literally basically tell me to shut up and stop crying because I was disrupting everyone.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You probably would have gotten like an uncomfortable hug in Canada.
Well, what happened when that person told me to pipe down, they actually said, pipe down. And it made me cry harder because I'm like, this guy doesn't know my story. It's just, oh my God.
Maybe he's watching this podcast and he feels, or listening and feels real bad.
I didn't even know, I didn't see the guy's face.
It's okay. But he'll know.
Yeah. Yeah, if you were in Miami and you saw Twin Sisters in theater at Sunset Place,
and there's
you're
weird guy.
a dick.
There's a guy crying in boba tea. like literally, I'm picturing like we have to do a t-shirt now of you in a movie theater with your boba tea being like, and then like on the back with French fries.
Yeah, yeah. It's okay to.
It's okay to cry in your boba tea.
Eat your emotions. It's fine. So, but. Everyone, please reach out because that's what this whole podcast and platform is for, to help you. And again, we've made it very clear. We don't have all the answers.
I have no answers.
Yeah, but we want to be on this journey with you and help you in any way that we can. So whether that's helping you find resources, helping you research things. I mean, any questions you have, like, how do I search for this or how do I start that?
Yeah.
Email us at hello@originsunknownpodcast.com.
And what's really great, again, another facet is that we're in very different stages of our search.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. Again, you're much farther than I am. So you guys are going to be experiencing me. I'm purposely going through every step.
It's kind of like the documentary. Like Samantha filmed everything in real time, which made it very compelling because it was real emotions. It was real. Nothing was scripted. Nothing was rehearsed. It was just raw emotions. And
it's crazy to me because I came up with a docuseries concept in 2009 when I was at art school, of course, to do a docuseries. And so that's why I've never done anything like Ancestry or Psychic or anything like that. And so it is going to be really cool for us to be doing this real time. And it's pretty scary to let you guys in on this with us. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the goal is that we'll all just be scared and terrified together. But we'll
cry together.
We're going to stand back to back, arms linked.
Yes. So just know that strength comes in numbers. And that's what we want to create here, is to create a community that makes you feel less like...
alone.
Yeah. I'm by myself. No one gets me. To, hey, I have my origins group. You know? So,
and then we promise not to hug you if you don't want it.
Yeah, don't worry. And plus, we need to do the social distancing anyway, as we sit here.
Well, we did our tests.
We did our tests, by the way.
Yeah. In case anyone comes at us, we did all of our testing. Okay, well, I am feeling like we're going to need a part 2.
Yes.
On your story. This is... until we kind of have a following, we're going to be doing our stories just to start. It's really good for us to go first.
Yeah.
If we're expecting all of you to open up and talk to us, we have to do it first. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about adoption in Canada in the 80s from my perspective. I don't really know a lot, but I've actually found some pretty interesting things. Like I said to him, like, oh, hey, do you know that I was supposed to submit a veto?
Yeah. No, and honestly, if you find out some information that we don't talk about, please share it, because this is really kind of like an open platform. We want
is your podcast.
Input, Yep.
So, okay, great. Well, we are going to go and watch Letterkenny because I'm obsessed.
All right. Well, you guys have a great night. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, great. Bye, guys.
Bye.
If you'd like to connect with us on Instagram or TikTok, you can find us at
Origins Unknown Podcast.
You can follow my co-host at
Beyond the Tats.
You can find me at
Sea Bear Huntington. We're also on Twitter. Follow us at
Unknown Podcast. If you'd like to visit our website, it's
originsunknownpodcast.com. Also, if you'd like to send us questions, share your story, or even just say hi, you can send us an email at
hello@originsunknownpodcast.com. Special thanks to Pace Randolph for writing, performing, and producing the audio for our podcast. Follow him on Spotify for more wonderful music.